You all formally to the fourth semi-annual Sociology Disciple Scholar Lecture. We're happy to have everyone here. We want to especially welcome people who have come from outside the department, especially Dr. Pierce's family. Welcome. We hope you guys have a good time here today. My name is Lance Erickson. I'm a professor in the sociology department, and I happen to be chair of the committee that oversees the lecture series, and that's why I'm here today. We want to express appreciation to our office manager, Margaret McCabe, and the student secretaries. There's Tessa and my daughter, Mara, who I love having here, and Cooper. Well, thanks for their help organizing. And as well, I want to recognize Dr. Jane Lopez, who's a member of the committee. So just a bit of brief background about why we do the lecture. It's not very old. Our department chair, Curtis Child, had the idea to do this a few years ago. And not long after he had this thought, we had a lecture from Elder Holland. And some of you may remember this. It was at the beginning of the semester, beginning of the year, a few years ago, and he gave a talk that got some attention outside the university. He made a reference to building the temple in Salt Lake, and people building the temple would have a trowel in one hand and a rifle in the other hand, meaning they were building the kingdom on one hand while they were defending it. And he talked about sometimes the brethren feel like maybe some of the people that are here are taking shots, not in defense, but towards Salt Lake. This was alarming for a lot of the faculty and people on campus, and a lot of people felt hurt by the assertion that we didn't have a Salt Lake, that we weren't on their side. And we had a discussion in our department among our faculty immediately after this talk, and I think without exception we felt like, well, he's not talking to us. We aren't taking shots towards Salt Lake. We are defending the church and the faith, and we're trying to help our students live faithful lives while they pursue scholarly knowledge and degrees. And we realized, I think, that a lot of what we were doing was informal. It happens in our classrooms, sometimes after class is officially over. It happens in our offices when people come in, when students come in with questions that may be about class content, but then lead into spiritual topics. And these experiences are especially meaningful for us as faculty. And I think one of the reasons why we love being here at BYU. But we also thought we could make more of a formal effort to do this. So that is kind of the conceptual basis and foundation of the lecture series that we do. And we cycle through the faculty. And this time we've asked Dr. Hayley Pierce to join us and do it. So we hope as you listen to her remarks that you get a sense for how somebody who is a professional sociologist uses their expertise not only to learn about the world, but to learn about spiritual things. And the professional side of Dr. Pierce, I'm sure we'll see, isn't harmful for her faith, but it actually strengthens her faith. So we hope you see that, and we hope that as you continue throughout your time here that the same happens for you. Our opening prayer today is going to be given by Lacey Paulson, who is a sociology major. Thank you, Lacey. We are going to invite Scott Sanders, who is our most recent Disciple Scholar lecturer, to introduce Dr. Pierce. And after he does that, we'll hear from Dr. Pierce. At the end of her remarks, if we have some time, we'll open, I haven't really warned her about this, but we'll open up for questions. If there are any questions for her regarding her lecture that you would like to ask, we'll hopefully have a few minutes for that. If we don't, we don't. But if we do, we'll enjoy that.
Okay, the traditional but tired format to introduce an academic speaker of a marquee event like this would go as the following. First, you share the speaker's name, position, and area of expertise. So today we're hearing from Dr. Hayley Pierce, a soon-to-be associate professor of sociology at BYU, who's also the current recipient of the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences Martin B. Hickman Excellence in Teaching Award. She's nationally recognized for her research working on improving the health and well-being of mothers and children. Then you talk about where they did their training and schooling. So Dr. Pierce received her PhD at the University of California, Berkeley, and did a master's and bachelor's degree of what I would argue the more prestigious Department of Sociology at BYU. Following that, you try to quantify some sort of scholarly production so the audience just really understands the magnitude and the brilliance that they're about to receive. And so for Dr. Hayley, it would be 23 peer-reviewed publications with 27. I have an old CV, wow. See? And I have 8 student co-authors. There's probably more than that now. But if we're being honest, that number, very few people here really understand how impressive that number really is. And then finally, to make it seem more impactful, you sprinkle in a bunch of superlatives and hyperbole. A particularly crowd favorite, if you're ever going to do this, is the ones that everyone just goes crazy for, is you say, I can think of no one more qualified to speak today than whoever you're introducing. But this template provides some sort of idea of professional accomplishments, but doesn't really provide any sort of real insights into the person. For example, that tired template, we wouldn't learn that Dr. Pierce, like some of you here, is a first-generation undergraduate and graduate school scholar. Additionally, while pursuing her education and establishing her national recognition as a scholar in improving the lives of women and children, she balanced gracefully 2 careers and kids. Or that she navigates what we'll call the unique challenges of being a female faculty at BYU, with I think the most unique being a representative from the business school coming to a faculty meeting and asking her and another female faculty if they were students or staff. So, but even these insights don't adequately give us insights to how Dr. Pierce's discipleship and her love for others permeates her activities. And the best way to really understand the disciple side of Dr. Pierce is to literally ask anyone. The last couple weeks, I would go up to random students in the hall and ask, do you know Dr. Pierce? And then tell me something about her. And so I have a list of just random sampled comments from students in the JFSB. So 1, what sets Dr. Pierce apart is her unwavering dedication to her student success. She just doesn't teach the material, she invests in our growth, offering guidance and encouragement every step of the way. Another student said, I've never felt more supported than I have in Dr. Pierce's class. Another, best professor at BYU. That student understood the assignment. And then a fantastic one, and there's more, these are just the highlights, right? I've never had a professor who I felt cared so deeply about me and others in the class. Not only did I learn a lot in her class, I regularly felt the spirit even when discussing hard and challenging topics. If you spend any time with Dr. Pierce, it's easy to see how discipleship, the pure love of Christ, and her pure love of others plays a central role in her day-to-day actions. And you will see how she channels that same brilliance, time, and energy towards uplifting the lives and well-being of everyone around her. And that is why I can think of no one better and more qualified to be today's disciple scholar than Dr. Hayley Pierce. Dr. Pierce.
Okay, I was told how to do this. In the vest. Thank you, Scott. That was so nice. What a tender way to start. Okay. These go in here. Everyone wear a vest before you present. It's quite convenient. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming. I know that time is precious, and the fact that you are here means a lot to me. Plus, I have people that span so many different kind of stages of my life, and I just am so grateful that you are here. My mom's telling me my mic is doing weird things. Thank you, Mom. That's why they come, right? As I was putting this together, I came up with my title. I wrote it all out. I felt so confident. And then I thought to myself, holy, holy, holy all sounds the same, but they mean different things to me. And I'm going to mean them in different ways, but you can't hear that when I say it. And so I'm going to have some sentences behind me as I say them so you can actually see which version of holy I'm reading so you can know. So here's what I'm thinking. Holy, dedicated to or consecrated to God, or a religious purpose, or sacred. Holy, to the full or entire extent, completely. Or holy, having or being full of holes. And sorry, John, holes is in the definition of holy in that case. He doesn't like it. So this is where we're coming from, and this is what we're talking about today. If you've taken my sociology of gender class, you know that a big theme throughout it is to shatter the boxes. Shatter the boxes that society puts you in, that others put you in. Question the boxes that others put you in. Remove yourself from unnecessarily constrained boxes and just breathe, exist, and thrive. I still believe in that conclusion, but I've thought long and hard about that conclusion, and I've thought long and hard about these boxes that we put ourselves and others in, and I found that the boxes often serve a purpose. In fact, that purpose is holy to me, and I'll explain that. But for these boxes to remain holy, they also need to be holy. They need to allow for growth, expansion, difference, creativity, and individuality. Once these holy boxes become holy, that is where we can live and love wholly as our whole selves. I want to take you through my journey of understanding the role of boxes. That holy boxes need to be holy in order for us to be whole, as God sees us, and to see others as whole too. Before I dive in though, let's make sure we're on the same page. When I say boxes, I mean the often limited expectations we place on certain people, things, labels, identities, etc. For example, when I say the word ball, we generally conjure a similar image. The type, color, and shape of the ball might vary a little bit, but we broadly have an idea of what a ball is and what a ball does. Perhaps you've never given much thought or wondered how we form categories. I will call them boxes, as it is just a natural and automatic part of being human. But the fact that humans have the capacity to categorize objects is actually quite remarkable, and it is one of the abilities that allows us to store an incredible amount of information in our brains. Having categories for things like apple, dog, and ball means that we can group things that are alike, helping us easily store new information and helping us to make quick inferences about things we've never seen before. Imagine for a second that we didn't have the ability to form categories. It would mean that every time we encountered a new object, we'd have to learn about it from scratch. The fact that we have categories means that whenever we encounter a new apple, we don't have to learn about it. We can just put it in the apple box in our mind and apply what we know about other apples and safely assume that this new apple is a piece of fruit, tastes sweet, and is nutritious. Likewise, whenever we encounter a new dog, we put it in our dog box. My dog box is quite simple because I do not know much about them, but somebody else's dog box might be full of specifics. They'd know the way it behaves, what it eats, whether it's safe to approach, etc. To someone who studies trees or is interested in trees, they can probably tell you a lot about these specific ones. To me, they are all pine trees. Maybe they have pine cones. I don't know more than that. But to someone with a more detailed tree box, they can probably tell you the names of these trees, where they grow, if they have pine cones. They have a more expansive experience looking at them. The same can be said for these sports logos. To some, their sports box is limited. To others, they get various emotions looking at these boxes and looking at these team logos. So not only do we use boxes to make sense of the world, but we also attach emotions and significant meaning to boxes. And we often develop a strong emotional response to things and people put into those boxes. If you ask my 8-year-old son James, for example, about these sports logos, he'll get fired up with a passion and energy both for and against the teams included in these pictures. We, as people, rarely hold an entirely neutral position towards any box, regardless of who or what it describes. As a demographer, someone who studies the composition of a particular human population and the social dynamics that change that composition, I love boxes. In fact, my research exists because of boxes. Let's imagine a large US Census survey, for example. What if it was all open-ended questions? What if we asked everyone in the United States to answer the question, how would you describe yourself? While the responses would be really interesting, how would we ever draw conclusions about the roughly 332 million people of the United States if all or most of the answers were different? Rather, we use boxes. We rely on a certain number of categories to keep things simple. We can learn a lot of important things from this use of boxes. For example, in one research project done with colleagues Melissa Jones and Ben Gibbs, we examined the link between school suspension and early adverse childhood experiences. These adverse experiences include things like physical and emotional abuse and neglect, parental incarceration, exposure to household interpersonal violence, among other things. The use of school suspension and expulsion is a widespread phenomenon in American schools. Yet much of what we know about these exclusionary practices provide really very little insight into the personal biographies and circumstances of the students themselves, especially their histories of childhood trauma. We found that high schoolers who report 4 or more adverse childhood experiences were nearly 4 times more likely to have been suspended or expelled from school compared to students with ACE scores of 0. Additionally, we found that Black youth were 2.5 to 3.5 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school than white youth. Our results support other studies focused on racial bias in school discipline, even when considering childhood background. Our research finds that Black youth are disciplined harshly no matter their childhood background. This research used quantitative survey data, which truly wouldn't exist without reliance on a limited number of response options. We utilized boxes to look at experiences with early adversity, school suspension, race, gender, and more. Of course, surveys are not perfect at capturing all the nuance that exists among people, but without this survey full of boxes, I would not have been able to conduct this research and then speak to 50 school counselors about it and about integrating trauma-informed practices into their school disciplinary strategies. This tendency to group into boxes is particularly useful for grouping things around us, and for grouping humans, at least in some cases, such as survey design. When applied to humans, though, it gets a little bit more complicated. These kinds of labels are attached to our own identities, or the identities we perceive about others. Boxes often allow us to find our people. For example, being children of God is one of the most inclusive boxes I can think of. All humans, no matter what, can fit inside this box. The best part about it is that this box of being a child of God can be so meaningful even when it is so inclusive. And I argue perhaps because it is so inclusive. Just because it is something that applies to everyone does not mean that it can't be personal and real and intimate at the individual level. I am no less a child of God just because you are one too. I am no less in touch with the Spirit just because you are in touch with the Spirit too. We are not fighting for space in this box, or really in any box for that matter. We can be united in this holy box as children of God. Some identities that we have are visible for any onlooker, while others are not so visible. Regardless, identities can be sacred, whether people see them or not, because who we are defines our experience with the world around us. Thanks to an amazing suggestion from my colleague Jane. In my introduction to sociology class, I discuss hidden identities on the first day of class. Simply, identity is like an iceberg. Some aspects of a person's self-construal are visible by an onlooker, while many are underwater, not visible or readily revealed, often because that identity is personal and tends to make life a bit more complicated to navigate if some of those identities don't match what is popular, dominant, or privileged. I have each student anonymously write one of their hidden identities on a piece of paper that I collect after class. I then compile their identities in a list and read it in the following class. Amongst my hundreds of students, here are a few of the identities they chose to share. This is just a list from one semester, and you can see how many bullet points? There's about 180 here. I'll just read some of them in a row. A friend of mine attempted suicide, and I found them after their overdose. I am terrible with girls. I'm a white Mexican. I am struggling with past injuries. I have a hard time focusing. I am both super self-confident and extremely anxious at the same time. I'm living with chronic pain. I questioned my sexuality for a few years. I came home from my mission early due to a suicide attempt. I am an opera lover. My relationship with my parents is really strained, and as a result, I feel more stressed to exceed all expectations, and I'm spreading myself too thin. I struggle with addiction. I have to have everyone liking me to be happy. I struggle with anxiety and depression. Due to a normal upbringing, I find that I have extreme difficulties relating to and becoming comfortable around others. I grew up in a very poor city. I have bipolar depression disorder. I have to try really hard to speak fluidly and clearly because I have a huge stutter and talk really fast. I lost my scholarship last semester and have about $40 in my bank account. I grew up on a farm and know how to drive all kinds of machinery. I'm emotionally driven. My wife miscarried and I don't know how to help her, and there is no one to help me either. I have severe depression and ADHD. Family oriented. When I'm intimidated by people, I tend to become more reserved because I'm afraid of judgment from them. Anxiety, depression, biracial, sexual assault survivor, only child, bipolar, introverted, self-conscious, eating disorder, first to go to college, parent, social, non-Mormon, loss of a parent, Native American, suicidal, experiencing a faith crisis, mixed sexual orientation, early return missionary, and the list goes on. I have hundreds of these. The silence in the room echoes a lot of what it is here. When I read that list each semester, it's palpable. I always ask the student what they think about the list. They've mentioned that they don't feel as alone or as different as they previously thought. They learn that everyone has struggles and hopes and hardships. They learn to be careful about the comments they make in class because we are not all the same. At the end of one semester, a student emailed me a personal short story that they wrote, including the following excerpt. Quote, "One Monday turned out to be especially eventful. In the first class that day, we talked about identities, and anonymously, I came out to the entire class. When my professor read my submission out loud, quote, feeling like I don't belong because of my asexuality, quote, it was all I could do to just sit there and try to keep my sobs from shaking my body. I couldn't stop thinking about it all day. Had someone learned something new that day? Had somebody figured out their own sexuality? How many queer people had been in that class? How many ace people had been in that class? How many people had sat there with tears of their own on their face thinking, I thought I was the only one? It was that day that I made the decision, or maybe came to a realization, or maybe both at once. I am here to help people." End quote. Finding companionship and comfort in a shared box, or a label, or an identity, and sharing your boxes with others, that, my friends, is holy. Letting people know that you are here, that the things both above and below the surface of that iceberg matter, and being loved because of and not despite these boxes is a holy gift to receive and to give. When I was thinking about our tendency to put people in boxes, I thought about one of my favorite examples, Jesus Christ, and one of my favorite parables, the parable of the lost sheep. Oftentimes, in our anxiety to live God's commandments, we focus on everything we should avoid to remain righteous. We construct this is what it takes to be a good member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints box. But this tendency can become dangerous when we start to look at life like the Pharisees, who fixated so much on staying uncontaminated from the world that they quantified everything, focused on outward obedience and turned commandments into a measuring stick. The gospel is not a series of limitations and rules. Rather, we should see the gospel as Christ sees it, looking for all the good we can do through it and all the change we can make by it. In Luke 15, we learn the parable of the lost sheep. It reads, Jesus drew near unto him all the publicans and sinners for to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, This man receiveth sinners and eateth with them. Jesus spake this parable, saying, What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he lose one of them, doth not leave the 99 in the wilderness, and go after that which is lost, until he find it? And when he hath found it, he layeth it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And he calleth together his friends and neighbors, saying, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost. In this parable, the shepherd leaves the 99 in the open field to go after the one lost sheep. Jesus couches this idea in a question that is meant to draw the hearer to action. Will we leave the 99 and go after the one lost sheep? Jesus took the form of the servant and became obedient to the point of death to save us. In order to participate in the mission of God, we too must leave behind some things and go after those who have been lost. What prejudices, misconceptions, ideals do we have to leave behind in order to humbly, truthfully, lovingly approach those who may be different, unwelcomed, and misunderstood? We must leave our comfort zones and selfish desires to join God in their mission for the lost sheep. When Christ was here, he was continually in pursuit of lost souls. And it was for this reason that he came to earth to dwell among us. Just as he left the 99 for the one, he constantly acted. He went out of his way to come into communication with those who were lost. And he exhibited such kindness towards lost souls that they drew near to him. I am not surprised that the Pharisees looked upon the congregation that was in the presence of Christ and noticed it was the fallen women of the town, the riffraff, the dirty, the sinners, the unwanted, and instead of repelling them, Christ receives them. He welcomes them and he loves them. I cannot tell you what all the Pharisees thought of Christ, but they thought as badly of the Lord as they possibly could because of the company which surrounded him. And so, Christ designs in this parable to defend himself, not that he cared much about what they might think, rather to tell them that he was seeking the lost, and where should he be found but among those whom he is seeking? Should a physician shun the sick? Should a parent shun their child? Should a community shun their members? Should a shepherd avoid the lost sheep? We do not always know who is lost. Sure, we may think there are obvious signs to look for, but that does not tell us who is lost in their hearts, in their faith, or in their communities. As maybe some of you have noticed, I have the Minerva Teichert painting Rescue of the Lost Lamb hanging in my office. It serves as a reminder that I should be careful how I place my labels on others or what boxes I put them in. Many silent sufferers would be overlooked if I make assumptions, make judgments, and put up walls. Rather, the painting reminds me to seek out the lost, to follow them over hills and into the desert, to eat with them and to love them. We each have a shepherding responsibility. How do we begin to search for a sheep if we do not know who we are looking for or where they might go? If we only care to see the top of the iceberg, we won't accept that what is below the water is just as much a part of their identity as what we can clearly see or what they allow us to see. Then we will not truly know our sheep enough to find them. We do not know how long the shepherd looked for the sheep. We do not know what sacrifices the 99 sheep who were not lost had to make as they awaited the return of the shepherd. And we do not know the sacrifices the shepherd had to make on behalf of the one who was lost. But in the end, when the shepherd and his 100 sheep are reunited, I am sure that they are not thinking about all they had lost. Rather, they are celebrating their reunion. So instead of fixating on all we can't do or all we have sacrificed or differences we may have with those who are lost, let's focus on the good we can do and be ready to act. Focus on finding the Savior and helping them to find the Savior, but realize in the end, we are all sheep who need to be found. He is the one who lifts us, who makes us more than we could of ourselves, and who carries us home to be once again with our heavenly parents. Jesus was not deterred by the lost box in which the sheep found itself, nor was he distracted by the not lost box that the 99 sheep were seemingly in. While these boxes are important for determining who is lost and who is not, A Holey box allows these experiences to look different for everyone. This is important. Someone who may appear lost to another may be entirely at peace, while another who appears not lost may actually be yearning for comfort and connection. This is where these holy identities need holy boxes. I have encountered this experience many times in my office as students come to talk to me. They sit in front of me with the Rescue of the Lost Lamb painting behind them and share their souls. They share what is good in their life. They share what is hard and what is making them worried and scared and happy, and it is a holy space for me. And you know what? They continually challenge my former black and white thinking that I'd used to determine who is lost and who is safely in the fold. If I let an overly simplified lost box guide my interactions with my students, I would be forced to assume that they were unhappy or misguided in their choices, instead of listening to the joy and happiness they have found in their holy, holy boxes. Conversely, if I didn't dig a bit deeper for the students who appear safely in the fold, I wouldn't learn that they were, in fact, feeling lonely and lost. Before I had the honor of teaching thousands of students here at BYU, 1,000? I should have calculated. Jake, I should have put you on that. A lot of my boxes were really black and white. I was trying to force all of God's creations into simple boxes. I was trying to force myself into simple boxes. But my students started to poke holes in the boxes I had created. These holes allowed air to flow into the boxes I had around things like membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, even how love and happiness could look. Holes where freedom, creativity, and individuality could seep in and permeate the walls of the boxes that were actually really important to me. These once black and white boxes took on a gradient. It allowed me to see the world and myself and these boxes as a gradient rather than black and white. It allowed me to love my students without the limits of the holeless boxes. Rather, I learned about them and their boxes and the individuality that colored those boxes. As I learned these things, I also grew to feel immense relief that it is truly just my job to love rather than judge. I feel like I can breathe and thrive in a way that I never could before. By letting myself and my students feel whole, just as we are, without constraints and limitations. This expansion from black and white thinking into a gradient applies to all things. In Genesis, we learn that God created the light and the dark, and the land and the water, which are the opposite ends of each spectrum. But those things are each just that, a spectrum. As there is light and dark, night and day, there is also a sunset and a sunrise. There is dusk and dawn, and at least to me, the beauty in a sunset exists because there is not constantly a sunset. It is the diversity that makes each experience within the spectrum of light worthwhile. Similarly, there is land and there is sea, but there are also marshes and bogs. Very rarely in our world, if ever, is there a perfect binary. Falling back on this kind of binary categorization can have negative consequences. Indeed, if you were to form categories for groups of people, you could easily make a false assumption about them, purely based on the category membership. In fact, this behavior is the very definition of prejudice, which is the tendency to make assumptions about somebody based purely on their membership in a particular group. On top of that, when people tend to place themselves in a group or what we might call an in-group, there will inevitably be others who are left out of that group, people we call out-group members. This is one of the complications of boxes. On their own, they are rarely nuanced enough and expansive enough to do people justice. Without holes, they are too constraining. Our boxes are, at least at first, defined by the world around us. Our family, peers, media, religion, education, culture, all tell us what a box should look like and act like. So we often inherit the expectations of the boxes from the people around us, and the institutions that precede us. But life experiences, an open mind, and an open heart shapes these boxes into new and holy forms. I have learned that boxes are complex, and they should be. In some ways, learning that others identify with the same box that you do can be extremely fulfilling. Or even learning that others identify with a similarly stigmatized box, even if the exact label for it is different, you still feel less alone. It is this exact experience where the boxes become holy. They are uniting and comforting. We are placed on this earth to experience the beauties and the wonders of it. Finding commonalities is one of those ways to feel divinely connected. What is more holy and Christ-like than seeing someone for who they are, holy, and loving them? As the list of hidden identities and from my introduction to sociology class and the parable of the lost sheep show, we are all a bit lost, just in different ways. Being lost is one of those really challenging boxes. When I say someone is lost, we all start to imagine a series of complex, often negative things. The lost box is generally not where we want to find ourselves or others. But maybe this is a great place for all of us to start practicing the art of making boxes a bit holier. Take some time to think about your lost box. How do you determine when someone is lost? How does that make you feel? Why do you think you feel that way? Here's where it gets trickier. Think about how that lost box is helping or perhaps hurting those you put in that box, even possibly yourself. Is there a way to allow for more wiggle room to see a world in which you see someone as lost may in fact not be? Or see that the fears you are attaching to that box are keeping you from loving others wholly just as they are? Or is your lost box keeping you from recognizing one of life's basic truths, that each of us are lost and need to learn to rely on Christ? There are countless times in my life where I thought I was broken and lost, that I wasn't fitting the box in the ways that I was told I should or the ways that I thought I should. Similarly, there are far too many times where I exhausted myself by judging the ways other people poked holes in their boxes to make them work better for them, or seemed to thrive while I thought they were just lost. My judgments often turned to jealousy as well. What I've learned, though, and this has been a key for my journey, is that the boxes have always been the thing that is broken. It is not me, and it is not others. The boxes are the things that need to change. We are all just doing our best to find happiness in a world of complicated boxes. And relying on Christ's help can be a sure way to get there. But having the support of those around us can sometimes make all the difference. Forming categories is essential for our everyday lives. But the same tendency that allows us to sort objects into boxes can also cause us to put people into boxes, which has some downsides, like we've mentioned. To fight our natural tendency to want to categorize, it's important to remember that while categorizing objects is incredibly useful, it is often more useful to think of these boxes as holy, meaning they can be unique and different than expected. Be open to being surprised and enlightened, rather than holding tight to a strict box that is probably not serving you or serving them anyway. Our heavenly parents have created a world of beauty. While all the things in this image fit in the flower box, they are each unique. I don't think anyone would choose to replace all the diversity of the flowers in this image with just one type of flower. It is the same with individuals. Forcing all individuals into one box is like replacing the flowers. We are trying to take the diversity and creativity of God's children and replace it with a single box that our earthly minds have created and accepted. We are constraining something that is bigger than I think our earthly minds can grasp. Sometimes I think God is up there saying, leave my creation alone. Let them thrive as I have created them. Let them exist in these holy, holy boxes in which I have placed them, and love them wholly just as I do. It has been an absolute honor to watch students begin the same journey that I am on, turning black and white thinking into a gradient, seeing these complicated boxes as both holy and holy, in order to love themselves and others wholly. I am grateful for the grace that students have given me as I have occasionally, though unintentionally, fallen back into my black and white thinking. It has been one of the holiest paths to walk as I learn to love myself and others without the limitations of holeless boxes. God's imagination, creativity, and power are so much greater than all the boxes in the world. Let's not be afraid to embrace these holy, holy, holy boxes. Let's seek that holiness and embrace that holiness so that we can wholly embrace God's love for us and for the community we have together. This room is full of so many people I love so much and have shaped this concept for me and has made me function in a way I didn't know I had the capacity to do. And I'm grateful for you all, and I'm grateful for you for being here. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Oh no, I tried to go longer.
Thanks to Dr. Pierce.
Oh, the presentation was quite fast. The talk, not so fast. Yeah. Oh, years, probably conceptually. Thank you. Yes, the first time I taught the sociology of gender class. It's like sacred ground in that room. You're talking to people who are fighting the good fight to find a place for themselves in this world. And I spend one class period every semester where we just talk about religion and we just kind of talk, right? It's not a lecture format. And the boxes came up day one in there. And that was, 6 or so years ago. And it's been growing and evolving and shifting, but day one in there, really.
Well, probably should close.